You're talking to someone, maybe at work or at a party, and you notice they keep looking just past your shoulder, or down at their hands, or at literally anything except your eyes. And there's this moment where your brain starts making calculations. Are they lying to me? Are they uncomfortable? Do they not like me? Are they hiding something? We've been trained our whole lives to believe that eye contact equals honesty, that people who can't look you in the eye are either dishonest or disrespectful or somehow fundamentally flawed. But what if I told you that avoiding eye contact has almost nothing to do with any of those things, and everything to do with how certain brains process information and manage overwhelming sensory input? If you're someone who struggles with eye contact, or if you've ever wondered why some people seem completely incapable of holding your gaze, what I'm about to explain might completely change how you think about this behavior. Because the psychology behind eye contact avoidance is way more complex and way more interesting than the simple narratives we've been told. Here's the thing about eye contact that most people don't realize. When you look into someone's eyes, your brain isn't just passively receiving visual information. It's working hard. It's reading micro-expressions, detecting emotional states, judging trustworthiness, scanning for threat or attraction, all while trying to follow the conversation and figure out what to say next. For some people, this happens smoothly in the background. Their brains can multitask. But for others, eye contact is anything but simple. But for other people, and this is where it gets really interesting, eye contact is cognitively expensive in a way that makes it almost impossible to do both things at the same time. Neuroscience research has shown that when certain individuals make eye contact, the parts of their brain responsible for social information processing light up so intensely that it actually interferes with their ability to process language and formulate thoughts. It's like their brain has a limited bandwidth. And eye contact alone is using up so much of that bandwidth that there's simply not enough left for the actual conversation. Imagine you're trying to have a phone call while someone is playing loud music right next to you. You can technically still hear the person on the phone, but you have to work much harder to focus on their words. You miss details. You hesitate. You struggle to respond clearly. That's essentially what's happening for some people when they make eye contact. The eye contact itself demands so much attention that it becomes nearly impossible to also track what's being said and form meaningful responses at the same time. And this isn't a character flaw. It's not a sign of dishonesty. It's simply how their brain is wired. In fact, studies have found that people with autism spectrum conditions often avoid eye contact, not because they're disinterested in social connection, but because direct eye contact can cause something very close to physical discomfort or even pain. The neural pathways that process eye contact in their brains can become overstimulated to the point where it feels genuinely aversive. So when they look away, they're not being rude. They're not hiding anything. They're literally protecting themselves from sensory overload. But autism isn't the only reason people avoid eye contact. And this is where things get even more nuanced. Anxiety plays a huge role here too. When you're anxious, your brain enters a kind of hypervigilant state. It's constantly scanning for threats. And from an evolutionary perspective, human eyes are incredibly powerful social signals. When you look into someone's eyes, you're making yourself vulnerable. You're opening a channel of communication that goes both ways, where they can read you just as much as you're trying to read them. For someone who's already anxious, that level of vulnerability can feel absolutely terrifying. There's also a fascinating cultural dimension that often gets completely ignored in Western conversations about eye contact. In many cultures, direct eye contact is actually seen as aggressive or disrespectful, especially when you're speaking to someone older or someone with higher status. In those cultures, looking down or away isn't a sign of dishonesty or discomfort. It's a sign of respect, of humility. But if you grew up in a culture where direct eye contact is treated as a marker of confidence and trustworthiness, you're likely to misinterpret someone from a different cultural background. They might seem shifty or untrustworthy, when in reality they're simply following their own cultural norms around appropriate social behavior. So now we have all these different frameworks colliding. You've got neurological differences where some brains just can't process eye contact and conversation at the same time. You've got anxiety, where eye contact feels threatening and deeply vulnerable. And you've got cultural differences, where the meaning of eye contact can vary wildly depending on where someone comes from. And yet, despite all of this, we've somehow landed on one oversimplified narrative. Eye contact equals honesty, and lack of eye contact means something suspicious. Here's where the psychology gets really interesting. Even when you know all of this intellectually, your brain still struggles not to make those snap judgments when someone won't look you in the eye. That's because the association between eye contact and trustworthiness is deeply embedded in how we've been socialized. It operates almost automatically. It feels like an instinct, even though it's actually a learned behavior, not a biological one. But let me tell you what happens when people who avoid eye contact are actually forced to make it. There's research showing that when individuals who naturally avoid eye contact are instructed to maintain it during conversations, their performance on cognitive tasks drops significantly. They struggle more with memory recall. They have a harder time processing complex information. They make more mistakes in their reasoning. It's not that they're stupid or incompetent. It's that the cognitive load of maintaining eye contact is literally stealing resources from other parts of their brain that they need to function well. And here's something that might blow your mind. Some researchers have found that for people who struggle with eye contact, looking away during conversation might actually make them better conversationalists, not worse. When they're not expending all that mental energy on maintaining eye contact, they can focus more fully on what's being said, on understanding the nuances of the conversation, on formulating thoughtful responses. They're not checked out. They're not disinterested. They're actually more engaged with the content of the interaction when they're not fighting their brain's natural tendency to find eye contact overwhelming. Now think about what this means for how we judge people. How many times have you dismissed someone as dishonest or weird or socially incompetent because they couldn't hold eye contact with you? How many job interviews have been lost? How many relationships damaged? How many opportunities missed? All because we decided that this one arbitrary social behavior is the ultimate test of character. It's kind of absurd when you really think about it. And if you're someone who avoids eye contact yourself, I want you to hear this clearly. Your brain isn't broken. You're not doing anything wrong. You're navigating a world that has decided one very specific type of social interaction is the correct one, and your brain happens to work differently. That's not a moral failing. It's just a neurological difference. And honestly, in a lot of ways, you're probably processing social interactions more deeply than people who can easily maintain eye contact, because you're not getting distracted by all that facial micro-expression reading, and instead, you're focusing on the actual words and ideas being exchanged. But I also want to acknowledge something important. We live in a world where eye contact still matters socially and professionally, regardless of whether that's fair or not. So what do you do with this information if you're someone who struggles with it? Well, first, you stop beating yourself up about it. Seriously, the shame and self-judgment around this issue is often more damaging than the actual behavior. Second, you can experiment with strategies that split the difference. Looking at someone's eyebrows or the bridge of their nose can sometimes give the impression of eye contact without the full cognitive load. Glancing at someone's eyes periodically, rather than maintaining constant eye contact, can signal engagement without overwhelming your system. And third, and maybe most importantly, you can start being more explicit about it when it matters. In situations where you really need someone to understand that you're engaged in listening, you can actually just say something like, "I'm listening carefully. I just process information better when I'm not making direct eye contact." You'd be surprised how often people respond with relief and understanding rather than judgment, especially now that awareness about neurodiversity is growing. The bigger shift that needs to happen, though, isn't individual, it's cultural. We need to collectively get better at recognizing that there are many ways to show respect, attention, and honesty that don't involve staring into someone's eyes. We need to stop using eye contact as a shorthand for trustworthiness and start paying attention to the actual content of what people are saying and doing. We need to create space for different brains to interact in ways that work for them, rather than forcing everyone into one rigid mold of what social interaction is supposed to look like. Because here's the truth. Some of the most insightful, honest, brilliant people I've ever met are terrible at eye contact. And some of the most manipulative, dishonest people I've encountered could hold eye contact like they were trying to see into your soul. The two things just aren't as correlated as we've convinced ourselves they are. What matters is whether someone is showing up with integrity, whether they're being genuine in their communication, whether they're treating you with respect. And you can do all of those things while looking at the floor. So the next time you're talking to someone who won't look you in the eye, pause before you make that automatic judgment. Ask yourself whether they might just have a brain that works differently, whether they might be managing anxiety, whether they might come from a culture with different norms. Give them the benefit of the doubt. And if you're the person who struggles with eye contact, give yourself that same grace. Your way of being in the world is valid, even if it doesn't match the dominant expectation. You're not less than. You're just different. And different is okay. Let me know in the comments if this resonates with you, whether you're someone who avoids eye contact or someone who's learning to see it differently. And if you found this helpful, consider subscribing, because we're going to keep exploring these psychological patterns that shape how we interact with each other and ourselves.